One thing is for sure. No one asked for this. Nobody. Nobody is curious to see the Meg doing any of these things. And the main reason for it is because she's established in the public eye as a self-centered, bossy, selfish narcissist. One who treats people poorly, especially her in-laws, which is so profoundly crazy. It's literally insane that she is doing this show with Love Meghan after all of the Oprah lies and the manipulative, fictitious Harry and Meghan series, also so full of lies. For anyone who is familiar with the history, this looks like the most bizarre trip. The whole thing is quite unappealing. Episode 4, halfway through With Love Meghan, Part 2, aka Season 2. Check this out.
When you think about cooking as a love language and showing up as a host and in hospitality, you always want to think about people's preferences. You always want to think about what they love.
Oh, she means being considerate, doesn't she? That's funny. Meghan, who lacked all consideration for her husband's family, culture, country, customs, way of life. She had zero consideration for them, but she's pontificating on it in this episode. Isn't that cute? Hypocrisy is the word.
Family, traditions, and recipes and things that you connect to. I wanted to share something with Samin.
This episode is a milestone, though. We have to get excited about this one. It is the first time we have seen her wash her hands in the whole series. It only took 12 episodes. Samin is the guest in this episode, and her energy is very enthusiastic and truly passionate about food, which carries the episode. She has confidence. She comes across as used to being on TV. She has a good command of the subject matter, unlike Meghan, and completely outpaces Meghan's flat approach. I really think Meghan in general throughout the last few episodes, like this part 2 that we are in right now, is outshone by the guests every time so far. In this second part, because these are guests who are very familiar with making television. Meghan was previously an actor, 7th on the call sheet, I believe it was. But she was a supporting actor, and she was not creating anything. She was not in charge of anything, and she was not the focus either. She wasn't like the main character in any of the scenes. This is a whole different can of worms, and she can't quite carry these episodes. That's established. It's unavoidable fact, but it becomes more pronounced when there is a more prominent presence on screen, like Samin or Tan, who really bring forth what is required to make a show like this, which is engagement and charisma, as well as the knowledge and skill required. Even though Samin is interesting, maybe it's because I'm 4 episodes in and it's starting to numb my brain, or maybe this episode really just plateaued. It all felt too boring. It just is. It's just boring. The way they put it together, where there isn't enough substance, makes it really hard to get invested. So, like, when you're watching a typical cooking show, like I think back to some of the ones that I've watched, where you're seeing recipes be built throughout the episode and a meal come together at the end, and you've seen each of these little dishes, the main dish, the sides, come together to create a finished plate. It feels cohesive. It feels like you're moving forward with it. But the way they format this, there's a lot of false starts. You start seeing her prepare either a snack or a drink or gift for the guest, and then it's something else. Now it's on to them doing something together, and then it's on to a craft, and then they come back to doing something together. And because crafts and cooking are two very different things, it sucks you out of it, and you don't have that flow where then it crescendos to the finished meal at the end. It kind of loses its momentum there. And also, I think that ties into the fact that there's a little bit of a lack of a niche I've begun to realize here. Because what Meghan really has here in this show is just a look at me, watch me do stuff type of show, where the only real fans of this show will be people delusional enough to like Meghan herself, even just to be contrary to overwhelming consensus that Meghan sucks. But shows in this genre need to deliver value, whether it's a cooking show, that stays very firmly in the cookery space for the most part. Even baking shows tend to sort of separate out a lot of the time when it comes to cookery shows. There's firm cooking, firm baking, and some people who do both. But Meghan is trying to add in and incorporate crafting with cooking and also gardening and hostessing. And it just isn't quite working with the audience and just as a show, objectively speaking, because those who are interested in crafting are not getting an in-depth tutorial. They're not getting enough of those close-ups of the process, what to do, what to avoid, mistakes to watch out for, advice on materials, lists of what they should buy to be able to recreate this themselves. They're not getting enough for the crafters, the hobbyists who would be interested in new complex crafts and even maybe have some of the materials. They're not getting enough information to really get sucked in and follow along with Meghan and do these crafts too. And those who are interested in cooking are likewise not getting enough of a recipe or a tutorial on how to actually create these dishes. And so there isn't going to be a huge crossover either when it comes to viewership interest in people who are equally as invested in cooking as they are in crafting. And I mean, of course, there are a lot of people who cook who may also like crafts, but it's just not the same. Hobbyist crafters are the ones who will have the materials on hand or be willing to invest their spending money in the materials needed to do the crafts that Meghan has shown. A casual crafter or somebody who's more of a cook, less of a crafter, isn't going to be interested enough to be willing to acquire the materials required to do the crafts that Meghan's showing. But hobbyist crafters will spend their spare cash on crafting goods and have crafting spaces in their homes. So that's one group of audience. But then there's people who cook, who love to try new recipes and like to watch cooking content and are more likely to either have or be willing to acquire the ingredients and or cookware needed to make interesting recipes similar to the ones Meghan shows. But there's not a huge audience of people who will do both of those things and have the extra cash to spend and space to have all this extra equipment and invest the time and money and energy in doing all of these things. Because both cooking and crafting take up a decent amount of time and spending budgets. So incorporating both into each and every episode, I think has actually narrowed the interest and the audience even more so than it would have had it been one or the other, either crafting or cooking. Also, because it's only like 30-ish minutes per episode, it feels a little bit chaotic, oscillating back and forth between crafting stuff and cooking stuff, and the timelines are all twisted up, and we're jumping back to when she prepared something the day before. It all feels a little bit cluttered and unfocused and disorganized, and that's also just not the most pleasant of viewing. And while I think in theory it can make sense to be like, oh, I'm going to do more than one thing, I don't want to be just doing cooking stuff. At the same time, you have to think about the audience. And while you might have a very small, narrow audience that is interested in all of these things and just watching Meghan do them, whether they're going to try them themselves or not, that will be a lot more of a slow growth sort of a situation when you have such a narrow niche that's not delivering enough value to really pull in a solid, strong audience from any one established genre. And so she's really limited herself in this way by restricting it to trying to shove these two things together in a way that doesn't feel practical or attainable enough. Now, had she chose crafting type things that were easier, that were more like stuff that you would potentially have just sitting around at home, or stuff that was geared towards families, little kids, it might have worked better, because a lot of people with young children do a lot of home cooking because that's, easy and economical when you have little kids, and also might be interested in having crafts, but she's not. She's doing very adult crafts, things that little kids would not be able to do, like at all. So I think that has really muddied up the entire series as far as the format goes, is this struggle between these things as well as chopping them up the way that they do. You lose momentum with each thing that she shows because it gets abruptly stopped and then picked back up for half a second later in the episode. The tone-deaf second season of With Love, Meghan has been eviscerated by UK critics as so painful. Reviewers say that the guests are the high point of the show and insisted celebrities making cameos weren't paid enough. I would agree. The Times issued a scathing take on Meghan's project, referring to the host as a woman in need of some cash. Hilary Rose told the outlet, the baffling series occupied the sweet spot where irrelevant meets intolerable and made her rock back and forth in a darkened room. The Telegraph labeled With Love Meghan as tone-deaf because the episode about cocktail making in Malibu is dedicated to the first responders and victims of the California wildfires. Yeah. And Rotten Tomatoes agrees. The score has not improved from part 1. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you have a happy day ahead, and I will see you next time. Bye!